Support for this podcast comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Whether you're a developer, property owner, manager, or commercial tenant, their real estate attorneys know the lay of the land, not just the law. Learn more at davismalm.com.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. WBUR reporter Walter Wuthmann, welcome back to The Common.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Busy day for you.
Busy few days. Busy week.
Talk to me about it.
We just got through the city's preliminary election.
And it turned out to be a historic preliminary election for the city of Boston, with not one, but two incumbent city councilors getting voted out of their races.
Definitely historic.
Okay, so Walt, let's run it back real quick. The lead up to this preliminary election has been extremely interesting because two of the incumbents running are at the center of a series of controversies that have occurred over the past year, right? One, Ricardo Arroyo from District 5, and two, Kendra Lara from District 6. We did an episode with Globe reporter Emma Platoff about this a couple weeks ago. But for listeners who might not have heard that conversation, give us a brief rundown of what's going on.
Yeah, so, as you said, Councilor Kendra Lara was running for re-election as she faces criminal charges from this car crash she was in earlier this summer, where she veered off the road and hit a woman's house on a residential street. Her license had been suspended for about a decade at that point. The car was unregistered. It's been in the news all the time. I followed her around on the campaign trail. It comes up in all types of conversations with voters. It really dogged her. Mm-hmm. And clearly voters had feelings about it because they voted her out last night by a pretty wide margin. She lost by double digits to her two opponents.
Okay, so that's Kendra Lara. What about Arroyo?
Arroyo has been fighting back against a series of scandals going back to last year when he was running for Suffolk County District Attorney. Documents leaked to the Boston Globe showed he'd been investigated for sexual assault while he was in high school, though he wasn't charged. He went on to lose the DA's race after that. Later, he was named in a federal ethics probe into U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins, showing that she had attempted to influence that election in his favor. She wanted Arroyo to succeed her as DA. And it seemed from text messages that Arroyo was really supportive of that. And then finally, he paid a fine earlier this summer for violating the state conflict of interest law for representing his brother in a case against the city of Boston. So sitting Boston city councilor representing someone in a case against his own employer, very messy. He paid the fine. Again, these things came up all the time. There was a bunch of news coverage. And again, voters seemed to care. They voted him out by double digits. And the reason you say this is historic is that in the over 40 years that Boston has had this district and at-large council system, this has never happened, that an incumbent has lost a preliminary election for their seat.
Wow.
And it happened twice last night.
Yeah. And you were out there reporting on Election Day. What did you hear from voters?
I found plenty of supporters of the two councilors who, these were two very progressive and outspoken councilors who they've done a lot of work on the council. I heard people out there supporting them. But again, even when they voiced support for them, they had to qualify it, and say, despite these things, I support my councilor. More than that, though, I heard people say, I'm tired of the negativity. I'm tired of the bad headlines. I don't trust this person to represent me anymore. I brought a piece of sound from a voter I spoke to named Ada Foser. I caught up with her outside an election location in Jamaica Plain. She voted for one of Lara's opponents, labor attorney Ben Weber. And here's, what she told me about why she felt she couldn't support Lara anymore.
I'm sorry about all of the trouble. I hope she has success. But I don't think she's in a good position right now to represent the district.
And what did you hear from voters about Arroyo?
Again, I heard about these scandals from people going to the polls. I went to two voting stations in Hyde Park, which is kind of the center of Arroyo's district and where he actually lives. And a lot of people felt hesitant about supporting him because of all of the personal baggage. So I spoke to a woman named Nareda Cruz from Hyde Park. She said she had voted for Arroyo in the past. but she just felt that she couldn't support him anymore. And here's what she told me.
I've had enough of what I've seen on TV, on the news, and that enough made me come out here and say, you know what, I think I'm going to choose differently this time around.
She ended up voting for Jose Ruiz, one of the opponents, who's a former Boston police officer and was endorsed by former Mayor Marty Walsh.
Okay. Just continuing with Arroyo and Lara, we know that they're out, right? What's next for them?
They will finish their terms on the council. There's still months to go. Both have said in statements that they're, dedicated to finishing their jobs and serving their constituents. I saw some reporting from Lara's election party last night, which sort of turned into a sad event pretty quickly. It was clear pretty soon after polls closed that both of these councilors had lost their seats. But she'd said that she was promoted to activist. Mm-hmm. So she is going to stay involved in electoral politics. Ricardo Arroyo comes from a deep line of public servants in Boston, a prominent political family. Mm-hmm. He's a former public defender. I imagine he will stay involved in public service as well.
Got it. Now, tell us about the candidates who could replace them.
So starting in District 6, which is Kendra Lara's district, which is in large part Jamaica Plain and West Roxbury, the two candidates that went through are labor attorney Ben Weber. He pitched himself as a progressive, but kind of without the personal baggage of Lara. He had the support of the Boston Globe editorial board, and he will face off now against William King, who's the IT director of a local conservation nonprofit. He falls more on the moderate, centrist, conservative Democrat end of the spectrum. He was supported by several of Lara's council colleagues. He will kind of represent that more conservative side of the spectrum against Ben Weber. And in District 5, Ricardo Arroyo's district, Enrique Pepin gained the most votes. He's going to go on to the election in November. He, again, is a progressive, and he was pitching himself as someone who would represent many of the same policies as Arroyo, but is a new person, a fresh perspective without the scandals. Yeah. He, gained significant endorsements from many unions, as well as Mayor Michelle Wu, who, holds a lot of weight. This is also her district. Mm-hmm. She lives in District 5. She's a District 5 voter. And I was looking at one of the precinct breakdowns, and the voting center where Wu lives and votes at really went out for Enrique Pepin. So clearly she had an influence with her neighbors. He will face off against Jose Ruiz, the former Boston police officer supported by Mayor Walsh, again, who represents more of the moderate to centrist vein of the political spectrum in Boston.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back.
Politics has never been stranger or more online, which is why the politics team at Wired is making a new show, Wired Politics Lab. It's all about how to navigate the endless stream of news and information and what to look out for. Each week on the show, we'll dig into far-right platforms, AI chatbots, influencer campaigns, and so much more. Wired Politics Lab launches Thursday, April 11th. Follow the show wherever you get your podcasts.
And we are back with more from Walter Wuthmann. When we had our conversation with Emma Platoff a little while back, we discussed what this election could mean for progressive politics in Boston. And here's what she said.
This is a huge test for the progressive movement in Boston. And I think that some folks in that progressive movement are worried that sort of the most prominent members of it, some of the most outspoken progressive councilors have been involved in these very high profile personal dramas and scandals. It will be interesting to see what voters make of that, and whether, they say, we think these folks can turn it around and we want to give them another shot, or it's time to see fresh leadership.
Now, Emma also noted that progressives don't have a monopoly on drama on the council. So what do these losses mean for the rest of the council?
We will see. I think Emma's really right that this is going to be a big test for progressives. So, if you look at the vote totals, and again, these are unofficial, it takes some time for the city to officially certify them. But in Lara's District 6, her opponent, Ben Weber, who is a self-proclaimed progressive and a labor attorney, he's the top vote getter.
Mm-hmm.
And again, in District 5, Arroyo's district, Enrique Pepin, also, a self-proclaimed progressive. I'm saying self-proclaimed because we need to see how they vote.
Right.
We need to see how they would vote. He was the top vote getter there as well. So, looking at these votes now, the tea leaves look pretty good for the progressive movement, even though they have lost these vocal and charismatic leaders. It does seem that there are these credible alternatives that people may coalesce around. But there's a couple months to November. There's super PAC money in this race.
Mm-hmm.
Other baggage could come up. There's no way to predict what's going to happen. But I think as of now, there's a very clear path to these two progressive councilors losing their seats. They may be replaced by two new progressive councilors.
Mm-hmm. Before we go, Walt, there were also preliminary elections for District 7 and District 3.
That's right.
How did those go?
So I'll start with District 7, where another incumbent was running, Tanya Fernandez-Anderson. She, cruised through pretty easily. She got almost 60% of the vote, and it was very low turnout, less than 1,500 votes. She's going to face off against Althea Garrison in November. That's a name some people might recognize because Althea Garrison has run in many, many elections. She actually served on the Boston City Council a few years ago when Ayanna Pressley left the Boston City Council to go to Congress. So she's been on the council before. In District 3, it was a very crowded race because Frank Baker, big, loud personality on the council, that more conservative type of Boston politician, stepped down. And whenever there's an open council seat, you're going to see a lot more interest because it's a lot easier to not have to run against an incumbent. 7 people ran. The top vote getter was a Boston Planning and Development Agency official named John Fitzgerald, who amassed a ton of support from Councilor Baker himself, from former Mayor Marty Walsh and their allies, from unions. Unofficial results show that he got 43% of the vote in the field of 7. We don't 100% know who the second person's going to be yet, but it really looks like it's going to be Joel Richards, who's a Boston public school teacher. He is more progressive. He was endorsed by several service worker unions and the Boston Democratic Socialists of America. He is leading Ann Walsh, an education nonprofit leader who is endorsed by the Globe, by about 100 votes right now. Again, these could change because they're unofficial, but it seems that he's going to be the second person to go through to November.
Okay. What are you looking for in November?
Oh, man. There's a lot to watch here. One thing I'm really interested in is, even in the preliminary, you started seeing the influence of super PACs, of outside money. Jim Davis, who's the chairman of New Balance, local, big, giant local sneaker company.
Never heard of him. Okay.
He's a huge Republican donor. He gave $150,000 to this super PAC that was dedicated to unseating Lara and Arroyo. That happened. So how is that money going to be used going toward November? All of these candidates have disavowed super PAC money, but, PACs don't actually coordinate with campaigns. So, we'll see what type of influence that has. It's kind of a new thing in the last couple cycles that we're seeing the influence of big, big money in these local council races.
All right. So a lot to watch out for during the November general elections. So, Walt, thank you so much for coming through to The Common.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Daryl.
That's WBUR reporter Walter Wuthmann. And that's our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, please go to wherever you listen to podcasts, especially Apple or Spotify. Rate and review us. It helps us a lot. Thank you so very much. Also, if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram or Twitter at WBUR The Common, or send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. We would love to hear from you. I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.